All right, so Final Fantasy 15. I have now played about 8 hours of the game, and I wanted to make my first video because it lays down the groundwork of the game, of the plot, and I assume the beginning of the game. Do this video a little early because the middle of the game is probably not going to be that exciting, and then the end of the game, of course, is going to have its own video. So I thought about 8 hours in, maybe pretty good, and then go from hours maybe 9 to 20 and then 20 to 30, however long. I heard it's about a 28-hour game based on how long and how many side quests and things you do. So my thoughts so far are ultimately all pretty positive about the game. It's definitely not as fun as Stranger of Paradise, but that is all right. They're all different games, and this, I think, does some things much better than Stranger of Paradise does. So, first and foremost, of course, I did the tutorial because I don't know about these games or the combat, and I believe the tutorial is ultimately a little too long. The gameplay is still action based, but it seems kind of slow. Whereas other games like Stranger of Paradise or Near Automata, they are really fast. And it's the same amount of button clicks, but there's a lot more happening, a lot faster, and you can just tell it's a lot more dynamic in those games. This is a little bit more methodical and slow, but it's definitely still action based. It's still pretty fun. The lore guide, I think, was very good. So in the beginning, you are able to do the tutorial, and then there's something called the lore guide. And that's not, neither one is required, but it's strange because I think the tutorial for the combat isn't needed. I mean, do it because it's kind of nice, especially if you've never played the game before. It's helpful, but ultimately it does kind of help you throughout the game as well. But the lore guide, I think, was extremely helpful. And it's something that if you want to start playing the game and you don't want to read, then you may pass over. And I think it's something that is borderline needed because it really laid down the groundwork to understand what is going on, because the game, I found out, really throws you in there. You don't know a ton, you don't know a lot about the backstory, who these people are, what the land is, but having read this lore guide really gives you a clue into what you're walking into, and just kind of helps give you some of that background information that doesn't make you so overwhelmed right off the bat. So the land ultimately is divided into two areas, one that is really militaristic, and the other one that is using a magic barrier to prevent that military, that Imperial Empire, from moving in and taking over. So the barrier, this magic barrier, is caused by the king, which ultimately he has to use a lot of his power. So it's almost as if he is suffering to create this magic barrier so no one can come in and overtake the throne and the land. And there are 6 gods. And there is an oracle that is essentially the middleman between these resting gods, right? They're not active, they're resting. And I guess the humans, no, I don't quite remember that, but the Oracle ultimately is Luna, the woman in a lot of the trailers I saw, that blonde woman in white. She's ultimately the Oracle, and everyone in the land relies on her, and she's a huge part of the game and the land because, again, she is the Oracle. And then there is another piece of art that discussed just that there are demons that show up when the sun sets and when it's dark. No huge deal. So the opening scene, you start the game, and now Noctis is in this church sanctuary, and it is burning. There is an enemy because you can see your counterparts doing some type of damage to something, but you can't really see what it is. I mean, everything's engulfed in flames. There's some enemy, as I mentioned, it's just shooting like a fire laser. And Noctis seems really weak. And it seems like all of his friends are ultimately just there to help him stay alive. Like, he has done nothing, Noctis, that is. So seems really weak, seems overwhelmed, seems like if he didn't have his friends, he would have died without a doubt. And so we see all of that, and then the king lets the let's see what's next. So yeah, we have that. Then we see like a screen, black screen, and it just says before the fall. So I guess this is before what we soon will find out the empire is going to come and overtake that city. So the king is ultimately going to tell Prince Noctis, so the king is in fact Noctis's dad, say, hey, you can go find your wife. Go to, it starts with an A, I forgot what the area is. And again, it's just really sudden for the player. And so I was somewhat taken back and trying to put the pieces together because you went from this burning sanctuary and then all of a sudden now this is like before the fall, and it's just a lot to take in. So, and you could tell Noctis has some like teen angst, like not just his hair, but he's really bratty and he doesn't quite talk back to his dad, but he just seems really sassy and like a moody brat, really off-putting. And immediately I did not like Noctis. I was like, this dude is a total chotch and a D-bag. I didn't like him. So you set off to go find your wife. And the last thing the king is just saying, hey, take care of yourself, really being like a father to him. And Noctis kind of just is like, get off my back. I am ready. I'm going to go get my princess, Luna. And I don't need you anymore. So they're on their way. And this is where a lot of the trailers have talked about, like, why is there a car and what's going on? So they got this nice old vintage car. They get in there, they're on their way to their first destination, and the car dies. I don't know if it's a battery or what it is, but ultimately that is where you see the title screen. You hear that song, Stand By Me, again, that we saw in the second trailer. And this seems to be a defining moment. The fact that they are driving and there's a team, for whatever reason, the development team has chosen that this is the defining theme and kind of the moment of Final Fantasy 15. And I can really tell that they're stressing the friendship between Noctis and the three friends, just because with all of the driving, with the little quirks back and forth, with their conversations, it's very apparent. The music, everything is driving this teamwork type of atmosphere. And yeah, I don't know, I think it does a pretty good job. So ultimately, your car breaks down, you push it into this town, into a place called Hammerheads, essentially just a mechanic. And you go and you talk to the diner. You get a bunch of the map opened up. This is where you also see Cindy Aram, which I never realized the PSVR game is Final Fantasy 15. It didn't mean anything to me back when I played that game 2-3 years ago. I was just like, oh, cool, it's a Final Fantasy fishing game, and I played it. But all the characters in the VR game are in Final Fantasy 15, I guess, obviously now. At the time, I didn't know that. I didn't even realize it was Final Fantasy 15 related when I played this game. So it's kind of cool. Like I remember it's kind of the not fan fiction, but fanfare of in the VR game, all Cindy Aram's there and her boobs are hanging out and she's bending over and like, oh, let me see your car. And it was a really weird dynamic in that fishing game. Now it makes maybe a bit more sense in this game because obviously she's supposed to be tantalizing and the male bait here in this Final Fantasy game. So I remember that, and now I remember some of the, I guess like some of the fish and a couple of the characters roughly. So kind of interesting. But when you go and they open up the map and Cindy helps you around town, you talk to the diner, you talk to Sid, who I'm guessing is the Sid who makes the airships and all the other Final Fantasy games, but he's our old coot at this point. So it's kind of cool how they allow you to open up for different hunts, different quests, like immediately. And I like the open world aspect where if I want to go on a hunt, I can do that right now, or I don't have to do it. It's certainly not mandatory. Get you some gil, get you some experience. It's up to you. The AP use is interesting. It's less confusing than in other games I played, but that they use similar mechanics. Like I remember Final Fantasy X, I played a little of that game, and their use of AP was really confusing. And again, some of the AP uses, they try to make it different rather than, oh, you have 20 AP and now you unlock this new feature. They try to change it up. This does a pretty good job. It's not too confusing, easy to get to, no problem. And then you could do some quests, gain some experience. It's kind of funny how the four guys can make a camp, and it's like a campfire. They're eating food, and you can just tell they're like chatting it up, living life. Kind of funny again. You know, you saw some of that in the trailer, and again, it's really pushing that Boy Scout teamwork, we're a family type atmosphere, and also makes me wonder. Really makes me think that at some point later in the game, probably near the end, someone is going to die, or the fear that they may lose them. Like someone's going to have to risk their life for Noctis, I think. And maybe it's all three of them. It really makes me feel like they are setting this up to where you may lose the three people who supported you through this entire journey. May not happen. Wouldn't surprise me if it did, though. That's where I feel like this is going. So the hunts are pretty fun, as I mentioned. It is kind of funny that you actually get in the car and you actually drive to these different destinations. So you can like run, but sometimes to find a certain animal, you got to go, you know, mile, 2 miles, a pretty decent distance. And so you actually get in your car and drive. And it's also interesting because it gives you some time where you're not always inundated with battles or information. You're not engaged. You can just kind of take it easy, which in a way I definitely like that, but I could see how someone may not like it because it is pretty bold or old and boring. But the relationship is a little odd with the friends during this. They poke fun at Noctis, but no one ever really laughs. Iggy's accent is ridiculous. I hate it. He sounds like an uptight butthole. And he's like, oh, I found a new recipe. Oh, I hate it so much. I wish he would shut up. Anytime I have the option to not talk to him, I do it. Horrible accent. I don't know what they're doing. Absolutely hate it. I don't know. I just don't like it. It's also funny that they grunt weirdly, like when stuff happens. You know, like Kingdom Hearts did it. I'm sure like Nier did it. I know some of the other Final Fantasy games do it, where something happens and they're like, ugh, like it just weird grunts. I don't know if it's like the voice actors. I don't know if it's the way Japan does things. It's really weird. And I don't know. It's kind of strange. It's also weird that driving really doesn't do much for like the plot. Like, I don't know. I guess overall, the more I do it, the more I don't like it. Initially, I didn't mind it, but it kind of gets old. So they throw you into the game. There's not much build up. There's no cutscenes hardly. And that's unlike the other Final Fantasy games I've played. And it's not a bad thing. It's just interesting. But there really is. There aren't much cutscenes. Like within, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes, you are done talking to Cindy Aram and you are out on your first hunt and doing quests. Like there really is not much between the beginning of the game and where you start doing that. And so the other thing I'll mention is I really like fishing, like both in person and also games. I don't know why, but the fishing aspect of the game is the biggest kick in the balls I have ever seen. It is so bad. Now, Final Fantasy 15, again, I mentioned in VR, has its own VR game, and that was incredible. The game worked great, but this is atrocious. First of all, they've introduced you to the fishing game, or the fact that you can fish, and you're on a pier, and there are 2 fishing spots on both sides of it. And I went to the one on the left, and I'm starting to think that maybe that one is not supposed to be for beginners. I fished for like 30 minutes, didn't catch anything. The fish broke your line like immediately. And then the one fish I fought for 5 to 7 minutes straight, like real human, real time minutes. I just don't understand it. It doesn't make any sense. You can't reel in without the tension on your line being there, which is going to snap it. But it's the fish is also moving side to side, and it's horrible. And they try to give you a little tutorial in the beginning. I mean, just text box, and that is horrible. It doesn't tell you how to catch the fish. It doesn't tell you that you got to throw the lure in a specific area, and then some of the fish are only going to bite it if it's a certain depth, and then only certain lures go to that depth. And then for the fishing hole I was in, literally every default rod, lure, line was the absolute wrong choice. Like the lure they start you out with, you will not catch anything. I spent 10 minutes throwing a friggin' lure out there to get a fish to bite it, and they never did because they don't bite that lure. Why not start you off with a friggin' lure where you immediately start catching fish? Easy fish. I mean, it's like there's no way as a beginning tutorial part of the game, you should learn to fish and not be able to catch a fish. In 30 minutes, I gave up. I was like, F this, I'm not doing it. Well, it turns out, as I mentioned, you're on a pier and there's 2 fishing posts. If I went to the one on the right, that one is a bit easier. And so I was able to catch fish there. But don't have 2 of them then. Just have the one, or make it apparent that, hey, you have to go to this one first. Horrible. Either way, now I am catching more fish, but it's not fun. It's still confusing. I don't understand it. Horrible. They should be ashamed, whoever the developers are, that they screwed up something as simple as fishing. Like a game, Toem is a very simple game, like 2D game, like, but fishing there was so much fun. Or Persona 5, fishing was a blast. They kept it simple. It was still really fun. And Final Fantasy 15 just screwed it up. I don't know if they tried to be too complicated. I don't know if they just don't know what fun is, especially to be a unnecessary part of the game. You can't do that. It's horrible. So anyhow, so you go to where you kind of have this, I forgot what they called it. It's a nice beach area pretty much. So you have the pier and you can get some food and you can fish and all this stuff. So he goes, and the plan is he went from his kingdom, the car broke down, they got it fixed, they went to this pier, and they're going to get on a ferry that is going to take them to the land where the princess is at. And so when you start to do that, I think they choose to stay at the hotel for a night, and it shows a cutscene where there's no music, just a bunch of action. You see fighting, monsters. They're all invading Insomnia, like the Crown City. And the king ultimately gets killed. It's pretty harsh. It's pretty fast. Again, with no music, it seemed weird. There was nothing, like it didn't show like the king was getting weaker and then he had to succumb and let the magic barrier go down. It was just like full on ransack. So you see the cutscene of them ultimately getting overthrown and the king getting killed. Noctis wakes up, obviously has no idea what's going on. Iggy walks in with a paper, and you could tell that something with him is visibly different. And as they discuss, he found out from the newspaper. All the newspapers have that, oh, the Insomnia has been overthrown and the Empire is now taken the crystal and they are overtaking the entire land. So obviously Noctis is shook up because he just learned his dad died. The others had family there. Everyone's wondering what happened to the town and the people folk there. So obviously I think this is where now you are going to go learn, see what has happened, see if they killed your father, and it is now revenge time. And that is where you're going to get your inner motivation to go and attack this Imperial Empire, revenge the death of your father, and ultimately, again, I think that second trailer, reclaim your throne. So after verifying that the king is dead, you go and you you try to go back to the Crown City, they block it, they have something where they inspect all the cars going through. So you find a back way in, and ultimately you get a call from one of the marshals of the city They verify that, yeah, your father is dead. And you see a short cut scene with a blonde woman in white. This is the Luna. And so she sees a couple dogs, and the one dog had a message from Noctis on it. And she gets down, she looks at the note, and she's kind of like happy. And then she stands up, and there's another lady who I don't know who this is, even now. She's in black. She shows up. They look at each other, and I'm like, okay. And then Luna shows her a ring. At this point, I had no idea. Like, what the heck is this? She obviously looked very saddened, and I didn't know what the heck was going on here. Was she sad because of the ring? Was she sad because she just learned that the city was overthrown? Did she know the city was overthrown? When was this meeting? Not sure. There's pretty much no background here. And I at that point I was like, I think the ring must be something the Empire is looking for, and ultimately that is going to be true. But not much about Luna yet. So anyhow, you see that cutscene, and now you go back to Hammerheads and you talk to Sid. And Sid said that, hey, I knew your dad. He knew this entire time that Insomnia was going to fall eventually. But your dad really fought hard as he could to keep that magic barrier. He pretty much provided and sacrificed all of his strength and everything he was to keep the people safe as long as they could. And I think that adds sentimentality and a rooting interest to get back at the Empire. And they do a really good job with this. Like, I actually felt at that point like, yeah, let's get him back. Like, in that short time, even though I don't know much about the king, the fact that he is trying to protect his people and he is actually suffering and in pain, and he has sacrificed something tangibly for those people, for that barrier, I think really helped create an atmosphere that made you care and made you invested in Noctis's journey. So initially, more about kind of the gameplay and things. So when you fight enemies, you gain experience, but you don't immediately get that experience added to your character. You kind of bank it up, and then you don't kind of cash in that experience until you camp, or you finish end of a chapter, or you stay at an outpost, and then you can redeem those, which initially I didn't like. I was like, dude, if I killed a monster, just give me the experience. That way I'm stronger for the next monster. But they add an interesting complexity to the game in which you can camp just outside and pitch a tent, and you and the guys are camping, and you get whatever your experience is. But if you pay for like a hotel, that will give you like 2 times the experience. And so it costs money, but you get more experience. So there's like a trade-off. And then it adds an interesting dynamic in that you can choose to not camp at all, and you bank as much experience as possible. But that obviously means the quests you are doing, you're going to be at a lower level than you should be, because you're not gaining levels like normal. Or you obviously can just keep redeeming the experience points and leveling up slowly, but then you may not get double your experience points, So if you get 1,000 experience points and you choose to go stay at a hotel, okay, you'll get 2,000. But if you don't cash in, if you don't camp, if you don't stay in a hotel for 4 hours of gameplay, instead of 1,000, you may have 5,500 experience points, and then you're doubling that because you went to the hotel. So again, it's a little kind of gameplay complexity, a different layer that I had never experienced before that I kind of liked. I think it's a good idea. So you do more quests at this point. You conquer a Imperial Empire base, and you find a tomb where you gain special abilities and weapons from the other kings and royalty that were in your lineage. So you just get different weapons, and like the first one will use your HP as you fight, but it's really, really strong. And so again, there's that trade-off, and you have to know, oh, I need to use this now, or I maybe shouldn't. And then there are different tombs that you keep getting these abilities. And so part of the game is you're going to go to all the tombs, get different abilities if you want. So You see another cutscene where the king of the Imperial Empire has a crystal from Insomnia. So he has a crystal, but he admits he is missing that ring that Luna had. And he was like, that is the final piece. We need that ring. Find the girl. We need it. Kill her if we have to. And then another dude was like, maybe we can keep her alive. So that laid down like, okay, now I know who Luna is. I know the ring is special. I know she had it, laying down some more groundwork. Back in the town, I played, there are a bunch of mini games, chocobo races, a pinball. I played this pinball game, Justice Monsters 5. And I've got to say, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. In the beginning, I had no idea what the heck was going on. And eventually, I kind of understood the purpose, but I don't know why they couldn't just have a normal pinball game. Normal pinball is fun. This wasn't fun. It was really boring. I think like after the first 10 minutes was okay because you're like, oh, what's going on? And stuff's happening. But then after the 10 minutes, it was really slow, really boring. It wasn't fun whatsoever. I'm not going to play another pinball game. I don't know why. They shouldn't have added it. Either do a better job, make it more fun, or don't have it at all. But there it is. So next thing you have to do is go see, and I want to say Iris, and that's not how they say it. I can't say it the way they say it because it doesn't sound right. Iris? Something like that. It looks like Iris. It is Gladios's sister. They're going to go to Lesbalem to see her, and then you drive there. It's a decent drive, and you find out that Luna is okay, because at first I guess the Imperial Empire was like, hey, the king's dead, Noctis is dead, and Luna is dead. Everyone's gone. Hope is gone. You guys are screwed. We're taking over. When obviously that wasn't true because Noctis isn't dead. But he's like, well, hopefully Luna's all right. And this verified that, yes, she was okay. And he now knows that. And then there is another tomb behind a waterfall that you need to go get. My one complaint here in the first 8 hours is that the plot doesn't progress very well. It's very slow to this point. Like, I want them to unravel the plot faster than they're doing. There are a ton of quests, and I'm starting to get the hang of fishing a little bit. It's still not a ton of fun. I like the quests. I like the fact that some are like quests like, hey, find frogs, go fish, so that you can take this fish to the cook so she can cook it so you can give to this cat to eat. I like the hunts to go find certain animals and hunt them down. And I like all the different things you can do. It breaks up the gameplay. It gives you plenty bang for your buck. And another thing that started to get on my nerves are the car rides. Like, for example, there was one quest I did, and then to move on to the next major quest, I had to drive 9 minutes. Now, I don't know if that was 9 minutes in real time. It definitely was a long time. If it wasn't 9 minutes, I was driving at least 5 minutes. And you got to imagine, you're actually driving, and you could have Iggy drive for you, and you could do like shopping and stuff. But like, they're actually driving on roads. Nothing exciting is happening. It's so boring. A little time, I'm okay driving. But once you hit 5 minutes of real time driving, you're like, dude, this is an awful idea. And sometimes you can fast travel. I can't exactly pinpoint when you can and can't, because I was like, oh, I'll fast travel to a city that's closer to that landmark that I need to go to progress the plot. And then I'll just drive a little bit rather than driving the entire way, and it wouldn't let me do it. I had to drive the whole way. So maybe there's something I'm missing, but that is going to get my nerves big time. If you have been somewhere, you should automatically be able to fast travel there whenever you want. The fact you got to actually sit there and drive is bullcrap, real stupid. So another complaint is that I know it's normal that when you die, you go back to your last save point. Perfectly fine, have no problem with that. But they really need to have mid-dungeon save points because, for example, I went into the cave behind the waterfall, And I made it all the way to the tomb. It's another tomb where you open it and you're going to get some type of skill or something like that. And I died right before I opened the tomb. And guess what? I have to go all the way through the whole freaking dungeon again. Like, that's bull crap. Why? Why do that? Put a freaking save point before you fight a boss. It's ridiculous. And I mean, there is a manual save, and I'm going to try to be more diligent in learning like when I can and can't do that. But every time I've tried to do it, once you realize, oh, now would be a good time to manually save, it doesn't allow you to. So then what's the point? Like, that annoys me. That's bad game design. It makes me hate the game. That's stupid. Thankfully, it's only happened to me once, but really dumb. Overall, I think the game is pretty fun. I like how they mix up the different styles of hunting, fishing, quests, driving, combat. Although I can see if I'm doing this for 30 hours, I can see how it's going to get old. It'll probably get old around hour 15. Right now I'm hour 8, and it's not too bad. I like the mix of it. But again, I wish they would push the plot faster. I want to know what's happening. I want to be invested, and it's just a slog, especially when I think they did a great job, as I mentioned earlier, making me feel invested in the king and his sacrifice. And I was ready for payback, and I was emotionally invested. But the fact that you don't have any plot points for so long after that, and then to do quests and hunts and all that stuff, at that point, I lost my feeling. That feeling I had of investment is already passed. Now I'm like, well, I guess I just gotta go to open up more plot point. Like, the timing isn't right. The pacing is bad. So, they need to work on that. So ultimately, what do I think is happening? Not that this is happening. This is a first-time player saying this is what I think has happened. This is what I think may happen in the future. So from what the game informed me, the Imperial Army wanted the crystal all along. The king was killing himself, protecting the city, protecting the crystal, because the Empire had 3 of the crystals and they only needed the 1. Now, what are they going to do when they get all 4 crystals? Not exactly sure. I'm assuming they are going to raise some type of overpowering power or monster or something, so that they can essentially be unstoppable and rule the world, or something, obviously, like, what bad guys do. That's what I think is ultimately going to happen. And then I'm also guessing that the king sent Noctis to find Luna. The king called Luna to him before the attack, gave her the ring, knowing that the Empire needed the ring. So that way Noctis is safe because he's outside the city when the attack happened. Luna had the ring, which they needed, and now she's gone. So when they attack, they can get the crystal, but they can't get all of it. And maybe it was something where the king knew at some point they were going to overtake him, and now's the time to ensure that everyone's safe. His son, the lineage, is safe. Luna, the bride, is safe with the ring that they need. Get them out of the way so they don't get damaged in the overthrow, and then I will just kind of release the barrier, let them come in, knowing that everything is set up, so at least the land has a chance. So that is, I think, the groundwork. I think right now, Noctis has not seen Luna. I think they've passed a note via the one dog, and I think he's going to fart around, and eventually he's going to have to come in contact with Luna. Not sure what's going to cause that. I don't know if they're just naturally going to bump into each other. There's probably going to be some type of acquaintance. Not sure. But they're going to have to find each other at some point. Now, the one trailer forecasted Luna in somewhere that looked like hell. And the intro of the game was knocked in somewhere that looked like hell. So I think that is relevant to the game at some point. Where that comes in, I'm not sure. I don't know if someone turns and is no longer a good guy. I don't know if somehow, I don't know, the Empire gets the crystal and then that hell is now what the earth looks like because they've overthrown the power and they have these monsters. I don't know if the two of them dove into hell to fight a demon, something, I think it's relevant. I'm not exactly sure how that's going to happen. I think the normal bad guy stuff happens, and then they're gonna start overtaking the world, and then Noctis is like, "No, this is my world and my people, and I need to reclaim the throne." And so he's gonna fight back and ultimately defeat them, and then he's gonna take his seat as king. I think that some of the party members are going to at least risk their lives for Noctis near the end. If they will actually die, I don't know. I have a feeling probably not, but I could be wrong. I could definitely also see them dying. I also don't really see any huge plot twists coming yet, but that's the beauty of the game, right? You make developers are good at making it look like the story's going one way, and then they hit you and it switches. So I think that will be interesting. And the one trailer I talked about, like, in the one I remember specifically, he was on the phone, Noctis, and he said, "Hey, call me if you want the truth." And I thought that maybe that was going to be a plot twist, like it's not what we thought, but I seen that scene and it's simply like just verifying that his father died. So we've already seen that. Nothing there. Overall, like I said, like the game. 8 hours in, so got quite a while to go still, maybe fourth of the way. And so hopefully the plot progresses a little more. Hopefully it's as good as I'm hoping, it was in the beginning. Right now, I think it's pretty standard plot, pretty standard Final Fantasy game. Nothing it does incredibly well, nothing it does poorly, middle of the road, which is better than a bad game. So I'm going to get back in there, play a little more Final Fantasy 15. I'll come back with part 2 when I feel like enough has materialized or I have any interesting guesses. And even the next video, I may break up like, hey, I played up to hour 15 and this is why I think. Oh, now it's hour 17 and this is why I think, or something like that. So hopefully, if you're watching, you enjoy it. If you got any advice, let me know. And hopefully Final Fantasy 15 will ramp up and hopefully it'll be real good. Looking forward to it. Thanks for watching.